On today's show, here we go. We're starting. Texas Governor Greg Abbott signs the new gerrymandered map into law, which could possibly create 5 new Republican congressional seats heading into next year's midterms. The governor of Missouri, Republican, orders lawmakers to start carving up his state's map and find one more red congressional district. Iowa Republicans in free fall, with Senator Joni Ernst announcing right before the show started that she's not running for re-election. I'll have more on this in a little while. Plus, breaking news, a federal appeals court just ruled that Donald Trump's tariffs are unconstitutional, but the court did not remove them. I'll have more on tariffs, inflation, and why Republicans right now have no choice but to gerrymander and turn to violence. ICE gets ready to invade Chicago and Boston. Donald Trump revokes Kamala Harris's Secret Service protection just as she gets ready to hit the road to promote her new book. This is The Mop Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you so much for joining me. Please like this episode so I remain in your feed and sign up for the notification bell. People have been having trouble with notification. Maybe you have to redo it. I don't understand it. Also, subscribe to my newsletter and my channel. And please share these episodes. I'm going to talk about politics, not morality. A year from now, the midterms will be in full swing and Donald Trump will be fighting for his presidency. All it takes is for Democrats to flip the House or Senate, and at least according to the Constitution, Donald Trump will have to answer for his sins. In the soil right now, you forage hard enough, we are beginning to see spring shoots of what could be the Democratic Party's reforestation of our House of Representatives and quite possibly the Senate, although I doubt the Senate, more likely just the House flipping blue. Barely, but there is talk, I don't believe it, of perhaps a massive blue wave, one big, beautiful blue wave. I know you've heard this before, especially on this show, and all of us are exhausted from last year's election. We don't want to think about next year's midterms. We don't want to be warned one more time, this is the most important election of our lifetime. Well, it is. In the age of Trump, every election is the most important one of your lifetime because America is riddled with cancer. Trump's the cancer. So each election becomes the treatment. You want to live, don't you? 2025 has already had several special elections to replace state and local politicians who retired or died. Special elections and off years serve as reliable leading indicators, and Democrats in 2025 seem to be overperforming, sometimes in a big way. There was a huge upset this week in Iowa's special election for State Senate District 1 to replace Rocky DeWitt, the Iowa state senator who died in June at the age of 66. So this is the Iowa State Senate. It's not the United States Senate, but this is important. The Iowa State Senate is where Republicans, up until this week, held a supermajority. Iowa Democrat Caitlin Dray flipped this deep, dark red Senate seat blue, defeating a Republican challenger, Christopher Prosch, by 10 percentage points. Why am I telling you this? Because Donald Trump carried that same district last year by 11 points. So we're looking at a 19-point swing. Kind of important. In January, Democrats flipped another deep red district blue, this one in eastern Iowa, where Trump won last year by 21 points. Another gigantic swing. Again, I'm not telling you there's going to be a massive blue wave. I don't think there is. I think there's a chance Democrats can win back the House by a very narrow margin if we all get to work. And that's what I'm hoping. I think given the structural problems Democrats are up against, flipping the House blue is a reasonable expectation. And I'm expecting it to be narrow. Back to Iowa. Iowa, as you know, is an important bellwether state, and we're seeing major upsets this year in special elections. Back in March, there was a special election in southeast Iowa where Trump won by 27 points in 2024, but this time the Republican candidate won by only 3 percentage points. So the Democrat lost, but a gigantic swing, picked up 24 percentage points. Still lost, but picked up 24 percentage points. Southeast Iowa shouldn't be that close for a Republican. Caitlin Drew flipping that state Senate seat blue means Iowa's Republican Party has now lost its supermajority in the state Senate. It means in order for the Republican governor, Kim Reynolds, to get confirmation for her appointments, she now needs 1 Democrat to vote in favor. This is also important because Republican Kim Reynolds is the least popular governor in America, which is why she's not running for re-election next year. Iowa elects a new governor next year, and should a Democrat win, now without that Republican supermajority in the Senate, it will be harder for Republicans to override the Democratic governor's vetoes. Iowa still has a supermajority in the state House of Representatives. Well, Tip O'Neill said all politics is local. If Iowa is gently, slowly turning blue, that affects the balance of power in Washington. Iowa's Republican Senator Joni Ernst was running for re-election, and then she began to see what was happening with these special elections, and she looked at all her polling, which showed her struggling in every single head-to-head matchup with potential Democratic challengers. Friday, she announced she won't seek re-election. I suspect when Trump fires Pete Hegseth, he'll nominate Joni Ernst to become defense chief. This is a very big story. Joni Ernst dropping out Friday. It's an open Senate seat now. Again, midterms are a year away. I know you're exhausted, but I want you to think about the midterms because Donald Trump is a merchant of chaos who thrives off people like you and me getting overwhelmed by his endless stream of brand new 4-hour news cycles. Every 4 hours, something new. And so we lose sight of what's important. We take our eye off the prize and we end up confused. We don't even bother to tie our shoelaces, or at least I don't. Yesterday, I woke up, went outside to get my coffee, and I looked down and I forgot to tie my shoelaces. You have to stay focused on the prize. What is the prize? Defeating Donald Trump in the midterms. Now, I was going to say we have to do all the heavy lifting in the midterms because we don't have the courts, but some judges are stepping up. I'm not going to go into it on today's show, but I'm seeing some judges stepping up. In the end, though, it comes down to us defeating the Republicans in the midterms. Don't forget the goal. Don't get distracted. If you don't know what you want, then you're in a constant state of reaction, which creates a feeling of powerlessness. And feeling powerlessness causes anxiety and depression. If you're feeling powerless right now, if you're feeling anxious and depressed because of what's going on in our country, the only way to deal with this is to work for the Democratic Party and win the midterms. For your mental health, I can assure you, nothing is more important than helping the Democrats right now win the midterms. Do it locally. Don't show up at town halls and scream at Senator Susan Collins. I was going to play that clip where she's just being heckled. It's pornography. It's very satisfying to watch these Republicans get booed. I don't think it helps. I think it makes us, our side, feel good. I don't think it wins us any votes. This is about winning the midterms. You got to know what you want. So, Iowa voters now telling pollsters that their number one concern is inflation, the cost of living. According to the nonpartisan Common Sense Institute, your average Iowa family is spending roughly $1,200 a month more today than they spent back in 2020. That's $1,200 a month more than they spent 5 years ago. It's why Harris, or partly why Harris lost, and it's why Republicans are looking so vulnerable for next year's midterms. Housing, food, and transportation all cost way, way more than anybody can afford. And with the tariffs, which were just ruled illegal by an appeals court, these tariffs are still in effect, and inflation is only going to get worse heading into the midterms. The Wall Street Journal reporting this morning that Walmart, Target, Hormel, Smucker's, and Ace Hardware all announcing they've been forced to raise prices because of, they say, the tariffs. Well, here's the thing about inflation. We saw this during COVID. Right now, we're seeing inflation. Maybe it's the tariffs, but maybe it's the tariffs just an excuse to raise prices, the same way COVID-related supply chain issues were an excuse for corporate America to just raise prices 3 years ago. It's called greedflation. President Biden warned corporations he would come after them, possibly with windfall taxes, should their profits far exceed inflation. Well, they ended up doing just that. We saw corporate earnings, and they were raising prices, and they would say, well, we have to raise prices because supply chain issues, raw materials got more expensive. And then we would see their quarterly earnings, and they raised prices because they wanted to increase their profits. The cost for raw materials had not gone up so dramatically to justify these price increases. So don't be surprised when you start hearing Donald Trump threatening individual corporations for charging too much. So, look, you all know I'm a Democrat, and last year, as a stalking horse for Joe Biden and then Kamala Harris, the problem I ran up against was trying to convince people the economy was better than it actually was. Now, all the yardsticks by which the game of electoral politics is played showed Biden and the Democrats legitimately qualified to claim they created the best economy in American history, but that was on a macro level. This economy doesn't work for everyone. And the yardsticks, well, they don't measure economic pain on the granular level. It's one of the reasons Harris lost the White House, and that Democrats lost the Senate and Republicans kept the House. It's one of the reasons. So all of this, what's going on in Iowa and special elections throughout the country this year, these are warning signs for Republicans that the midterms are going to be a bloodbath for them. And don't forget, historically, midterms always are bloodbaths for the party in control. I'm tempering what I'm saying here. I don't think it's going to be a bath, but a lot of people are saying one. Right now, if you go by history, if you go by the polling, if you go by consumer sentiment and inflation, next year should be horrible for Republicans. Okay, there's a chance that Donald Trump may be the end of history. So I may be naive because I'm still playing by the rules. That being said, if Trump and the Republicans won last year because of the economy, then they're going to lose next year because of the economy. And by lose, I mean the House of Representatives. I'm going to show you in a second the structural advantages Republicans have that often inoculate them from a horrible economy. But the House, when you look at the House, the Democrats just need to flip 3 seats. And if voters don't feel they're better off, and they don't, Trump's in trouble, which is why he's doing everything he can to steal the midterms. It's why Texas just Friday officially carved out maybe five new congressional seats. It's why J.D. Vance was in Indiana urging Republicans to do the same thing, although Indiana doesn't seem as receptive. But it's why Missouri, as of Friday, is now looking to find one more reliably Republican congressional seat. Donald Trump is looking at the tea leaves, and by his behavior, he senses a bloodbath in the race for the House of Representatives. Trump has even called for a new census that excludes the undocumented in order to dilute the voting power of deep blue cities all before the midterms. That census doesn't look like it's going to happen, mostly because it's unconstitutional, but it belies the desperation Trump and the Republicans sense about next year's midterms in the House of Representatives. Always remember, when they talk about carving maps and gerrymandering and redistricting, that has nothing to do with the Senate. It's all about the House of Representatives. So look, I'm not trying to gin up excitement for next year's elections. I'm just telling you, America is bleeding out rapidly. Historians say, looking at post-World War II history, they have never seen a democracy succumb to the charms of fascism so quickly as we have here in the United States of America, partly because our republic had already crumbled and we were papering over the cracks until Trump came along. And we've got a problem with this iteration of the Democratic Party with Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer in charge. Voters going into the midterms. No, Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, these guys are not going to make life better. All they can offer is recreating the economic conditions that gave rise to Trump in the first place. All they offer is a return to a year ago when Democrats could point to all the yardsticks designed by the rich and powerful to try to convince Americans, look, you're doing great. Don't be so negative. Don't look at your bank account. Don't look at your credit card statement. Look at the yardsticks we've created. You're doing great. So don't blame Biden. Don't blame Harris. It's not the Democrats. You know what? It's you, the voters. There's something wrong with you. You're either depressed or you're ungrateful, but don't put it on us. The economy's great. That was kind of the argument that I was making to convince people to vote for Biden and Harris. They weren't. Biden was offering a lot more than Harris was, but they weren't even talking about. We don't have a minimum wage anymore. The minimum wage is what, $7.25. The Republicans have effectively eliminated the minimum wage in this country, the federal minimum wage. They allowed inflation to do it. It hasn't been raised since 2009. What is the Democratic Party offering voters? Whatever it is, whatever they're planning to offer, for all our sake, I hope it works, because right now we're bleeding out and desperately in need of a tourniquet. That's basically all the Democrats have to offer. Vote for me and we'll stop the external bleeding. As for the internal bleeding, well, you'd have to vote for Bernie or AOC and the squad, and we're not offering that. This is the Mop Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you so much for joining me. Please like this episode so I remain in your feed. Hit the notification bell so you always know when I have a new episode. A lot of you are having trouble, even though you've hit the notification bell. So you might want to redo the notification bell, subscribe to this channel, and of course, share it. I want to talk about Doug Sosnick, who was White House Director of Political Affairs in the Clinton administration. He put together an interesting deck. That's what they call it. It's a PowerPoint presentation, but they call them decks. I think it does a great job setting expectations for us for the midterms. So again, Doug Sosnick is a Clinton advisor. Not talking morality here. This is politics, context, and history. This isn't Medicare for all or putting Exxon out of business, taxing billionaires out of existence. This isn't the distribution of wealth our nation so desperately needs. I'm talking the game of politics, which is generally played by rich people who just are in it to win it. They're amoral. They pick a side, could be Republicans, could be Democrats, and then they try to win. Unfortunately, until we change things, politics here in the United States remains a team sport. And as we know, when it comes to team sports, it's always the fans, the people who pay for all of it, who get screwed. You and I, all of us, are getting screwed because for Trump, this is sports. This is boxing for him. The Democrats, they're lousy with people like Trump who just want to win. So, this is from Doug Sosnick's presentation. And he shows polling going all the way back to George W. Bush. And it tells us that the current malaise isn't anything new. America has been in a funk for more than 20 years. Look at this, with a majority of Americans consistently saying our country is heading in the wrong direction. More Americans saying it's heading in the wrong direction than in the right direction. Today, there's a 14% differential. Close to 54% of our country has a negative view of things, while only 40% have a positive view. This is how the parties in charge lose midterms. Now, if you look at this graph, it's not so bad, actually, compared to the last 20 years. Look at August of 2009. That was Obama's first year. The differential between negative and positive was almost zero. So you can see from this graph, pessimism has been far, far worse than it has been, and we're getting acclimated to the pessimism. So the question as to is our country going down the wrong track, that may not be germane to election results. But look, it's actually closing in. It's not as bad as it has been in the past, which is good for Republicans. That's why this is one of the pieces of evidence I'm offering to you to explain why I think we'll be lucky to barely flip the House of Representatives next year. More from Doug Sosnick's deck, where he looks at polling data from Nate Silver. These are the daily disapproval ratings for Trump on his four major policy issues that he's building his presidency on. He's not performing well. 54% of Americans disapprove of the job he's doing on the economy. Then there's inflation, with nearly 60% of Americans disapproving of the job he's doing to tackle inflation. Trump won in 2024, many think partly because of inflation. So look at this. There's been a steady climb since he returned to office in late January. Every month, more and more people are disapproving of the job Donald Trump is doing to repair inflation. Trump can claim his tariffs aren't causing inflation. It doesn't matter if the tariffs are causing inflation or not. As long as inflation persists, Democrats will be pummeling him on the tariffs, which Trump has built most of his economic agenda on. Doesn't matter what the truth is, especially when it comes to the relationship between tariffs and inflation. Another thing about inflation is a lot of economists have said it's an emotion as much as it is a fact. Kind of like this, inflation is like the stock market. People raise prices based on emotion. And then when you ask people, how's inflation doing? They have more of an emotional answer than what the stats tell us. The tariffs reflected in Trump's polling on trade, well, that's dismal. More than 54% of Americans disapprove of Donald Trump's trade policy. Well, what is his trade policy? Tariffs. So Americans disapprove of the tariffs, and that's going to be an opening for Democrats, linking his trade policy, tariffs, to inflation. To me, that looks right now like the winning message for Democrats. Again, at least for me, given what this Democratic Party is capable of running on. They're not going to be running on Medicare for all or taxing billionaires out of existence. I'm talking about the game of politics. This is not morality, and it's not fact-based. This is winning elections in the age of Trump, which is all about appealing to emotion with a germ of truth. If I were advising Democrats, I'd hammer Trump on the tariffs. I think that's where you can peel off establishment Republicans, the free traders. And I think the best you can hope for with those establishment Republicans is they stay home for the midterms. Now, midterms are where you can punish Trump if you're a Republican without decapitating him. This is partly a mandate on Trump, but it's also a mandate on Mike Johnson and the Republican Party. So there are a lot of Republicans who are afraid of Trump. They like Trump. But I think with tariffs, you can convince a lot to stay home on election day. I think a lot of Republicans will say, I'm okay with Trump, but I don't want him to have that much power. I can't bring myself to vote for a Democrat. I do believe in checks and balances, so I'm just not going to vote. And yes, there are, believe it or not, plenty of voters in this country who understand the subtleties of separation of power, who believe in checks and balances. We know this because historically, voters tend to vote for divided government. They don't like a president with too much power. I'll come back to that in a second. So Trump is strongest on immigration. That's his. That's where he's the closest. Where's the? Do I have that? Where am I? Well, anyway, he's still underwater on immigration. 45%, though, of Americans approve of what he's doing with ICE and the migrants. That's on all the policy issues he's building his presidency on. He does best on immigration. 45% of Americans approve of what he's doing. The migrants, ICE. The cruelty, the racism, xenophobia. It resonates with the American people more so than any other issue Trump is building his presidency on. So the message Trump is receiving, because he's looking at the polling, it is go with what works. And if you go with what works, push harder on immigration. Demonize, dehumanize, scapegoat, and punish. That's the Republican message. Tell the American people you're protecting them from monsters like Abrego Garcia and then ship them off to torture chambers in El Salvador and Uganda because with about 45% of American voters, that's a winning message, a message Trump, I suspect, is hoping will eclipse his problems when it comes to inflation, the economy, and trade. Not talking morality. If I were a paid advisor to Donald Trump, looking at where he's strong, I would say you got to go full Hitler. So I have one more slide from Sosnick's deck. There it is. Okay, one more slide. I love this stuff. Why? History is a massive ocean, and these charts tell us where we are in time and where we're heading. Trump could be the end of history, meaning the end of the historical dialectic, where it's just him. They said this after the Soviet Union fell. It's the end of history. Well, we learned from the fall of the Soviet Union that history doesn't end. It just, one historical dialectic ends and the beginning of a new one shows itself. You could say Roosevelt was also the end of history. Trump is the end of history. I'm talking about in a Hegelian sense. Trump is the end of history, but there's a new dialectic, and it's our job to create the antithesis. That means history still serves as our guide. It doesn't predict the future, but it guides. It guides us. So working off the Gallup polls, this is really interesting. Doug Sosnick, this is the Clinton advisor, he concludes that Trump's approval ratings are exactly where Obama's and Clinton's were when they suffered massive defeats during their midterms. He cautions that Republicans have insulated themselves, I guess he means, gerrymandering, to prevent maybe a massive loss like the one we saw in 1994, where Clinton lost 54 seats and Newt Gingrich became speaker. And then if you look at 2010, Obama, 2 years in, lost 63 seats in the House for his midterms. In 2009, Obama came into office with a majority in the Senate and the House of Representatives. And for 2 years, he could get some of his agenda passed, like Obamacare and the massive stimulus bill. But after the 2010 midterms, for the rest of his presidency, he never again had a legislative branch entirely controlled by Democrats. So I love Obama. Not my favorite person, but I have an emotional connection. He's not Bernie. So why am I an Obama apologist? Because I lived through his presidency. I remember the shellacking he took in 2010 and how that was the end of his presidency, at least when it came to domestic issues. He got reelected in 2012, but he had to deal with Republicans who controlled either the Senate or the House for the last 6 years of his presidency. 6 out of 8 years, he was dealing with Republicans in either the House or the Senate. After 2010, Obama spent the next 6 years protecting what he accomplished during his first 2 years in office, and at the same time trying to keep the government open as Republicans worked to slash budgets and not raise the debt ceiling. Same thing happened to Bill Clinton. First 2 years of his first term, Democrats controlled both chambers of Congress and they controlled the White House. And then the rest of his presidency, for the next 6 years, we had divided government. There's a pattern here. This is what Americans want. It seems they give a new president, everything he wants. They give him a legislative branch controlled by his own party. And for 2 years, Americans say, let's see what you got. And then the next 2 years or 6 years, that president is denuded of all his power. It's the Constitution, actually. It doesn't always work, but that's the way it's supposed to work. Trump, the first time, took office in 2017 with Republicans controlling both the Senate and the House of Representatives. Look at this. You got Obama, Clinton, and Trump all getting elected with majorities in the House and Senate. Trump used that political capital for one thing, to pass tax cuts for the rich. And then, if you look at this, then there were the midterms, 2018 midterms, and look what happened during the midterms. Trump lost 40 seats in the House, and Nancy Pelosi became Speaker again. And his last 2 years, a disaster. 2 impeachments, Russiagate. He loses the election. He instigates an insurrection. The Democrats never let up on him. So they didn't. You can see Americans, in modern American history at least, historically, we prefer divided government. Biden came into office with Democrats in charge of the House and Senate. He passed more progressive legislation than any president since FDR. That's according to Bernie. The red wave during the 2022 midterms never materialized. The Democrats only lost 9 seats, but that was enough to flip the House of Representatives from blue to red. Democrats kept the Senate, but Biden lost the House. Kevin McCarthy and then Mike Johnson became Speaker, so Biden spent the last 2 years of his presidency fighting them. They were clawing back all his accomplishments. Americans prefer divided government. That's what Americans vote for. The first 2 years of a presidency, there seems to be a wave where one party dominates the executive and legislative branch. And then 2 years later, the president is checked by at least one congressional chamber controlled by the opposing party. This is really the pattern since Newt Gingrich took control of the House in 1994. I think the only outlier in this pattern would be George W. Bush in 2000. The Democrats controlled the Senate, barely. He's the only outlier. By the way, look at Sosnick's slide. Our last midterms were 2022. Biden was president, and that's the best. Look at that. That's the best performance of any president during the midterms since George W. Bush, who defied history by picking up 8 seats in the House. But that was in the aftermath of 9/11 when George W. Bush became the most popular president in American history. That's true. Right after 9/11, George W. Bush became the most popular president in American history. How did he do it? By ignoring intelligence briefings labeled Osama bin Laden intent on flying airplanes into the World Trade Center. He literally ignored those intelligence briefings. The towers came down, and 90% of Americans said, "What a guy. What a guy." So another suggestion for Donald Trump, if you want to do better in the midterms, do what George W. Bush did and let another country attack us. That seems to work. So what are we looking at in the midterms right now? Well, in the Senate, Republicans have a 3-seat majority. Plus, the vice president breaks ties in the Senate, so that's a 4-seat majority. Democrats need to flip 4 seats next year. Sosnick says that's not likely going to happen. He says there are only 6 competitive Senate races out of a total of 33. John Thune is the Senate Majority Leader, Republican. He's relatively unknown. He's new. This is his first Congress as the leader. That's an advantage. He's not a lightning rod the same way Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is. Schumer, when you look at the Democratic and Republican leadership in Washington, D.C., Schumer is the most unpopular politician in Washington. There are polls showing Schumer just as unpopular, if not more unpopular at times, than Donald Trump. So when voters go into the booth to pick their senator next year, they ask, or at least I hope they're asking, do I want John Thune or Chuck Schumer to be the majority leader? Even some Democrats like me don't want Schumer to be majority leader. I want Democrats to control the Senate. I don't want Schumer in charge. Like Pelosi, Schumer's become a liability. Trump and the Republicans demonize Schumer. They will be running against Schumer next year the same way they used to run against Pelosi. The way they ran against Pelosi in 2022, and they were able to flip the House by demonizing. So who do you think is the most popular politician in D.C. right now? I'm not talking about Bernie. I'm talking about Bernie's the most popular. That's not wishful thinking. That's a fact. Bernie has a net positive approval rating of 5%, which is unheard of in Washington, D.C. But among the leadership positions, who do you think is the most popular leader in Washington, D.C.? Who would you guess? Among Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Chuck Schumer, Speaker Mike Johnson, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, J.D. Vance, and Donald Trump. Who is the most popular? Only one is above water. In other words, a majority of Americans approve of the job he's doing, as opposed to the other guys where a majority of Americans disapprove of the job they're doing. Who do you think it is? I'll tell you in a second. He has a 2% net approval. Leave a comment, make a guess in the comments section. Who do you think is the most of the leadership from both parties? Who's the most popular? He has a 2% net approval rating. Again, not close to Bernie, who has 5%, but anyway, I'm talking about people in leadership. Who do you think it is? You give up? Okay. Leave a comment, write it down. All right. And then, okay. The answer is Hakeem Jeffries. Hakeem Jeffries. The midterms next year, I believe, is really about the House of Representatives. I agree with most people who say the Senate will stay red. It's between Johnson and Jeffries. What are we looking at? I wanted a picture of Jeffries and Johnson. No. That's Jack Johnson knocking out James Jeffries in the fight of the century. That was 1910. Wrong. Johnson. By the way, film of this, if you should watch, I don't think it's Ken Burns. I think his brother did the Jack Johnson documentary. Unbelievable. One of the best things I've ever seen. The documentary, Jack Johnson. In fact, I'm going to watch it tomorrow. I've seen it like 5 times. That is Jack Johnson knocking out James Jeffries. Film of the fight. This was 1910. It was banned throughout the South because a white fighter, Jeffries, losing to a black man, Johnson, well, that blows holes through the theory of white supremacy. So it's like what they're doing in Florida right now. Don't teach it. Can't see that film. Makes white people uncomfortable. Okay, there we go. This is, right? Okay, that's the matchup between Johnson and Jeffries, Mike Johnson and Hakeem Jeffries, which will also blow holes through right through the theory of white supremacy. Hakeem Jeffries will become the first black Speaker of the House of Representatives. And as I said, he's DC's most popular politician. because people don't know who he is. There's a lot to be said for remaining unknown. Mike Johnson, on the other hand, is inextricably linked to Donald Trump right now. The reason he got elected speaker was nobody knew who he was. Now we know who he is. Control for the House. This is a ground game. It's won district by district, which means what plays for Democratic voters in, say, Manhattan doesn't necessarily play for the Democratic voters in the suburbs of Manhattan. Hence the odious Josh Gottheimer, my sister's congressman, Democrat, Bergen County, doesn't even hold town halls. The worst of the worst, Josh Gottheimer. Okay. The Democratic Party, by the way, there are seasons, and right now is the season to trash your own party. This is when, in the lead up to 2026, this is when you fight with your family. This is the way it goes. There are seasons. So the Democratic Party controlled the House of Representatives from 1955 to 1995. All that ended after the first 2 years of the Clinton presidency. Clinton, Democrat, during Clinton's first 2 years in office, he had control of the House and the Senate. He lurched to the right, passing the crime bill, which funded 100,000 new cops. He promoted the 3 strikes and you're outlaws. He was for the death penalty. And he ginned up fear of this non-existent super predator. It had racist overtones. They talked of this new type of criminal that didn't exist. And that's why we needed 100,000 new cops. Clinton immediately presented as a fiscal conservative, reining in debt, balancing the budget, cutting spending, and declaring the era of big government is over. He did all of this his first 2 years in office to placate Fed Chair Alan Greenspan, who told him, if you do this, I will keep interest rates low. What does that do? It juices the stock market. It papers over the structural damage being done to our economy. Clinton put Al Gore, his vice president, in charge of eliminating government waste. The first 2 years in office, he was talking about government waste. Well, there is no government waste, at least compared to any other business. Waste in government, the proverbial $10 screwdriver, it's just another way of demonizing the social safety net. It makes it easier to slash Medicaid and food stamps when you talk about the $700 coffee pot that the Pentagon bought. I don't know if some of you are too young to know about this, but during the Reagan years, they talked about the $700 coffee pot as an example of massive spending. Well, it was the Pentagon that bought that $700 coffee pot, but it was Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps that had to suffer. Nobody ever cuts the Pentagon. So when you talk about government waste, you're demonizing. It's a dog whistle to demonize our social safety net. Clinton, leader of the party, president, and he moved Democrats to the right. His first 2 years in office, he championed Republican issues like fighting crime, reining in spending. So by the time Newt Gingrich came along in 1994 with his Contract for America, the midterms, Republicans, a lot of Americans thought, well, if Bill Clinton's for a balanced budget, putting the social safety net on the chopping block, cracking down on criminals while criminalizing poverty, I might as well vote for a real Republican. Why am I wasting my time with a faux Republican when I can vote for Newt Gingrich and this new class of Republicans. That's why Democrats lost control of the House of Representatives in 1994. Now think about this. Democrats controlled the House of Representatives for 40 consecutive years until 1994. Clinton was so busy acting like a Republican, Americans figured, well, why not start electing more of them? 40 straight years, Democrats controlled the House of Representatives. Ended in 1994. And then, in order to get reelected after losing the House of Representatives, instead of tacking back to the left, Clinton decided to triangulate. The toe sucker Dick Morris, who's a Republican, was advising Clinton to triangulate, pick up Republican voters. You can get reelected by doing welfare reform. So in August of 1996, in the middle of his reelection campaign, Bill Clinton signed into law the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families Act, which, as he proclaimed, ended welfare as we know it. It's no longer called welfare, thanks to Bill Clinton. It's called the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families Act. This is Bill Clinton, Democrat, introduced work requirements for welfare, as well as a time limit. Temporary. It's called Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. Everybody warned him not to do this. Within 10 years, millions of Americans no longer qualified for welfare, plunging an additional 1 million children into poverty. So Clinton was reelected. He got reelected, but Republicans kept the House and they increased their majority in the Senate. So it worked for Clinton, maybe. Maybe he could have won even more if he didn't tack to the right, but it ruined the Democratic Party. So what he did was Democrats, thanks to Bill Clinton, were no longer the party of class warfare. They were no longer the party that protects the poor and the working class. For 40 straight years before 1994, really almost going back to 1932, when Roosevelt got elected and put together this coalition, the Democrats, really from 1932 until 1994, they braided liberal blue-collar workers from the North with inveterate working-class racists. The Democratic Party was always lousy with racists. Always. But even during the civil rights movement of the 60s, while racist Democrats went over to Nixon and eventually Reagan, the Democrats were still able to keep the House of Representatives. They never lost the House of Representatives during the height of the Civil Rights Movement. When Lyndon Johnson, Democrat president, 64, signs the Civil Rights Act, he says, well, I just lost the South. Well, yeah, you just lost the South. The House of Representatives, the American people, the Southerners, still voted for Democratic members of Congress. During the Reagan years, never lost. Democrats always had the House of Representatives. Why? Because they kept together this coalition. They remained the party of the poor, the working class, and yes, racists, because racists vote with their wallet. Clinton and then Obama changed the Democratic Party. It is no longer the party of the poor and working class. It's no longer a coalition of poor, working class liberals and racists, union members, liberals. Instead, right now, it's a coalition of individual identities and liberals who are aligned on social issues like abortion, guns, and same-sex marriage. As Clinton embraced Wall Street and took donations, he turned his back on class warfare, redistribution of wealth, the unions, and he appealed to everybody's individual identities and some social issues. This is why Trump finds it so easy to hive off Democratic voters by appealing not to class resentment, but to the elitists, not to the rich. He's not appealing to people who hate the rich. He's appealing to people who hate elitists, hyper-educated northern liberals, and resentment of one of the many tribes that make up the Democratic coalition. It's really easy to divide and conquer the Democratic Party. There isn't any glue. If they went back to redistribution of wealth, class warfare, money would be the glue that holds the Democratic coalition together. But Obama and Clinton didn't want class warfare. If Democrat, and this isn't going to happen, and this is why I think we'll be lucky if we flip the House blue. If Democrats really wanted to win, they would lead with class resentment, calling for a downward redistribution of wealth. Like I said, there's a chance the Democrats can win the House, and that's basically what all this is about, the House. All they need is to flip 3 seats. History is on their side, and so is the mood of the country. Again, this is why Republicans are desperately gerrymandering. According to Doug Sosnick, he's the Clinton advisor, he says the Cook Political Report estimates 40 competitive House seats going into the midterms, with Democrats having 4 more vulnerable seats than Republicans. In other words, based on today's polling, Republicans could pick up an additional 4 seats. If those 40 competitive seats played out according to the current polling, that won't happen. Now, Republicans could pick up 4 additional seats, and now it's official. Texas has gerrymandered. They've redesigned their maps. Greg Abbott, the governor, signed it into law on Friday. So we're looking at 4, maybe 5 reliably red congressional seats. Given the current state of the Democratic Party, given Trump's stranglehold over the media, politics in general, I am hopeful that Democrats will generate a massive wave that results in the House narrowly flipping blue. I think this could be one of the years where more people vote for a Democratic senator than a Republican senator, but Republicans still control the Senate. I think the same thing could happen in the House. It happened before. Republicans lost the total count for the House, but because of gerrymandering, they kept control. This was in 2012. Democrats received 50.6% of all the votes cast for members of the House of Representatives, but Democrats won only 46% of the seats, the GOP kept control of the House of Representatives in 2012. That's gerrymandering. They lost the popular vote for the House of Representatives, but they won it. Got to win the House district by district. Gerrymandering. So again, I think there could be a massive blue wave, but it will just give us a narrow win. The question when it comes to politics, the question I always ask listeners is forget morality, because Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries are amoral. They're only thinking about maintaining power over their individual caucuses, and then gaining more power over their individual chambers of Congress. So if you were in a leadership position, what positions would you stake out in order to win the House of Representatives? Hakeem Jeffries is looking at polls. He's looking at every congressional district and trying to figure out how to stake out positions for the Democratic Party that doesn't lose the Democratic Party votes. And this is the structural problem with the Democrats. Democrats calculate, what can I say, what can I do so I don't lose votes, as opposed to what can I do and promise and say that will win votes. When people vote next year, they're going to be thinking, I don't like Chuck Schumer, but at least he's a Democrat. I kind of like Hakeem Jeffries, but that's only because I don't know anything about him. And then other people are going to be saying, I don't like Trump, or I do like Trump. I like Trump, but what happens if Republicans get too much power? And then they ask themselves, well, what's in it for me? Why should I vote for this party? So put yourself, pretend it's a game, because this is how they look at it. What positions would you stake out if you were Chuck Schumer or Hakeem Jeffries? What are the Democrats right now promising voters other than stopping Trump? They think the only winning message to carve out is Donald Trump needs to be stopped. They do that. This is a structural problem that the Democrats have. They don't believe in bringing in new voters. They fish for the voters who are already there. Remember, 100 million Americans could register to vote, and they don't. The Democrats structurally are terrified of staking out any position that alienates the people who vote. So what do we see? You think, I'm going to ask you, leave a comment. Do you think this is a winning message? Because right now, this is what Democrats are offering voters. Full transparency on the Epstein files. The tariffs, putting an end to the tariffs, maybe. They're on board that. By the way, Clinton also signed NAFTA. I forgot to mention that. His first 2 years in office, he signed NAFTA. So they're running on what? The threat to democracy and Trump's corruption. What Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer are offering is an excuse not to vote for Republicans instead of a reason to vote for Democrats. It's pathetic. It's pathetic. And it's too late to change. It's too late to change because now it's about defeating Trump. This party isn't going to change anytime soon. We have some new polling, and some of my listeners, stop telling me not to look at polls. The reason I look at polls is that's what everyone in Washington lives on. And if you want to understand why your representatives in Washington or state and local, why they vote the way they do, you follow the money, see who donates to them, and then pay attention to the polls. It doesn't matter if you think polls get things wrong because they're just snapshots. Polls are the information that shapes the thinking of our government leaders. So if you don't look at the polls, you don't know what the people in charge are thinking or why they're thinking or if they're thinking. And I honestly don't believe the Democrats are thinking. A new Strength in Numbers poll mirrors what other polls are saying right now, and that is nationwide, congressional Democrats have an 8-point lead over Republicans. This, by the way, means nothing. It's a snapshot. That's all it is. We're more than a year away from the midterms, and this number will tighten. But these generic congressional polls measure the general mood of the country. And right now, these generic congressional polls all indicate American voters seem to prefer Democrats being in control of the legislative branch. And also, for the first time in a little more than a year, there's new polling showing that more Americans identify as Democrats than they do as Republicans. Last year, it was the other way around. Of course, that poll is within the margin of error, and you're basically measuring people's identity. How do you see yourself? A lot of people vote for Trump, but they still identify as Democrats. Similarly, a lot of Republicans identify as straight, but spend most of their time on Grindr. Okay, here is a slide. Is anybody still here? How are we doing? Okay. I need to get this out of my system so I can focus on other things. But everything is politics. Everything. It solves everything. What's going on. I'm going to get to Gaza in a second. The solution to Gaza is politics. Politics is not a dirty word. Politics aren't dirty. Certain politicians are dirty. Okay. One more slide. Here's a slide, again, from Doug Sosnick. This is to me, as they say, the tail of the tape. It's a graph. I'm drinking water. I apologize. It's a graph Sosnick made. It's off the Wall Street Journal's polling unit. It's incredible. This is polling data going back to 1990, measuring approval ratings for both the Democratic and Republican parties. And you can see right now, both parties, it's on the right, see that? Both parties are completely underwater. Republicans, as of July 20th, have a net favorability of negative 11%. And Democrats have a net favorability of negative 30%. Okay, with all that's been going on with Trump and the Republicans are only 11% underwater. Democrats are 30% underwater. 30%. Look at that. This is the lowest polling for Democrats since the Wall Street Journal began asking this question back in 1990. Lowest polling in 35 years. If you look at that, in the 90s, both parties were in positive territory. It peaks right before 9/11, and then it's a steady decline. Makes sense, right? The war in Iraq. Democrats, Pelosi was against the war. She becomes speaker, but can't bring herself to defund the war. There is a correlation between election results and these charts. If you take a snapshot of it, you can see Republicans hit their lowest point during the first Trump administration. Democrats hit their lowest point now during the second Trump administration. This is why some people believe it's the end of history. This is a new dialectic. How could Democrats have dropped this far? Well, the Democrats have a serious problem. And I don't know what the answer is. I also don't know what happened last year. I read all your comments, and a lot of you think the election was stolen, that Musk hacked the machines. I don't know. I agree with Greg Palast, who says the election was stolen legally through voter suppression. But if you look at the graph I just put up, there's a lot of ways to blame. You can blame Putin for 2016, which I do to some degree. I blame Putin partially for Hillary losing. I also blame James Comey's press conference reopening the Clinton investigation just weeks before the November election in 2016. I blame Comey. I also blame Hillary for forgetting to campaign in Michigan and Wisconsin. When it comes to 2024, inflation, I guess. A black woman, I guess. Definitely voter suppression. There's no question that Republicans have learned how to suppress the vote of certain groups of people who vote for Democrats. But the Democrats have a lot of problems. When you look at 30% underwater, that says they're losing for manifold reasons. They got many Trump's Democrats have a lot of problems. I don't think Trump's one of them. I think Trump is a symptom of their problems. Again, you can't win elections promising to return America to the economic conditions that gave rise to Trump in the first place. Again, that's all Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer are promising. And those two will never change their spots. I can promise you. Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer are never going to wake up one day and look in the mirror and see AOC or Bernie Sanders. They are who they are, especially since these elections are always too close to demand a structural change in the Democratic Party's leadership. An argument could be made that this is the poorest performing Democratic Party since Woodrow Wilson. Since the 20s, when Coolidge and Harding and Hoover. The Democratic Party, we like to think, got totally crushed in 1972 and 1984 when Nixon and Reagan pretty much carried, close to 50 states. I think McGovern carried, if he was lucky, he carried Washington, D.C., maybe Massachusetts, and maybe, is it South Dakota or North Dakota? And then in 84, Mondale, I think, carried Minnesota, maybe Massachusetts, and maybe Washington, D.C. We look at those as major blowouts where the Democratic Party was destroyed. No, they weren't destroyed. They kept the House of Representatives in 72. They kept the House of Representatives in 84. Now they don't. This is the worst performing Democratic Party. I'd have to go look at charts, but The Democratic Party is doing worse and worse, losing the House. They never used to lose the House. Why are they losing the House now? They've turned their back on the poor and the working class. All right. One of the things I kept telling you throughout the election last year, and here's my worst case scenario, Doug. I got that wrong, sort of. One of the things I kept telling you last year is that Trump has a ceiling. It's about 47%. On a good day, he can poll at 48%, but rarely. In 2016, he got 46% of the popular vote. In 2020, he almost got 47%, but Biden got 51%. So we're looking at 46%, 47% in the lead up to last year's election. 47%, 48% has been his ceiling since he entered politics. And throughout last year, his polling never really went past 47%. Biden's ceiling was above 51%. Joe Biden had been above the water in his polling at times. Trump has never polled above water. But on Election Day 2024, and only on Election Day 2024, for the first time, Trump cracked the ceiling. He cracked the ceiling that we never saw in the polls. He didn't break 50% in the election. He got 49.8% in the popular vote, which for Trump is incredible. That's about 2 points above his ceiling. So, how did Trump get 49.8% of the popular vote when on his best day, his polling showed him closing in at 48%, 47.5, 47.6. And then there are the swing states, which I'll get to in a second. Doug Sosnick, the Clinton advisor, wrote that of all the recent presidents, Donald Trump's approval ratings have been the most consistent, the least volatile. And as I keep telling you, and I was telling you last year, there's a ceiling. He's always underwater, and it's about 47%. The only time he cracked the ceiling was Election Day 2024. For those of you who don't trust the polls, this is where I kind of hear you. I see you. For those of you who say Musk stole the election, this is where I hear you. This is where I see you. I'm not saying the election was stolen. Again, I agree with Greg Palast. Stolen through legal voter suppression. However, nobody in their wildest imagination ever saw Trump closing in on 50% for Election Day, which is exactly what happened. It makes 0 sense. 0 sense. But certainly Trump isn't the type of person who would try to steal an election. A new Quinnipiac poll right now gives Donald Trump a 37% approval rating, but on Election Day last year, he was closing in on 50%. Right now, we're seeing some of the lowest polling for any president, let alone Trump. Now, some of you, and rightly so, have criticized me for talking about how badly Trump is doing in the polls. And you say, no, he's doing fantastic, the best he's ever done. Yes, the best he's ever done is still the worst for everybody else. A new Associated Press poll gives Trump the highest approval rating he's ever gotten, 45%. That's the best he's done, 45% from the Associated Press. So a lot of you are saying, well, I read polls that he's doing fantastic. Yes, he's doing fantastic compared to how he's done before, but for a 45% approval rating, he's still underwater. Biden, if you go back and look at his polling, he was above water at times during his presidency. So if 45% is the best Donald Trump has ever done since he went into politics, how does he get close to 50% of the popular vote on election day? For the life of me, I don't understand how he beat Kamala Harris. It doesn't add up. And I'm holding as you know, I took a lot of heat for promising you that the worst Harris could do was hit 270, the blue wall, okay? It doesn't add up. There's simply no way he could have come so close to 50%. Especially since the Democratic down ballot candidates in 4 out of the 5 swing states won, even though Kamala Harris lost. I should move on because it does make me sick. And I don't know if anybody's watching. I'm doing this right now for myself. So I need to move on and focus on other issues. But I mean, you look at Nevada, for example, and then I'm going to move on. There are other things I want to talk about. Jackie Rosen, the Democratic candidate, the senator from Nevada, ran for re-election in Nevada. She got reelected in Nevada with 5,000 fewer votes than Kamala Harris got. In other words, Kamala Harris lost Nevada to Trump. Down ballot, Democrat Jackie Rosen got 5,000 fewer votes than her opponent, her Republican opponent, and won. All right. This is the Mop Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you for joining me. Okay. Sorry about that. I'm doing this show for myself, basically, because I just got to clear my head on some things I don't understand about last year's election. We have new polling on the situation in Gaza. It's really interesting. I've never seen the American people this angry. Now, if you listen to this week's Ralph Nader Radio Hour, Ralph Nader and his guests talk about the role Gaza played in Harris performing so poorly in states like Arizona or Michigan, which have incredibly heavy Arab American populations. I remember last year watching the Democratic convention. They wouldn't allow Rashida Tlaib, the Democratic congresswoman from Michigan, they wouldn't let Rashida Tlaib, the only Palestinian American member of the House of Representatives, to speak at the Democratic convention. Now, is that why Kamala Harris lost? Partly. Kamala Harris should have insisted Rashida Tlaib speak to the convention. What were they so afraid of? By not allowing Rashida Tlaib to speak, it signaled to every Palestinian in America, every Arab in America, every Jewish voter in America, all the people who are appalled by what's happening in Gaza and appalled by Benjamin Netanyahu By not allowing Rashida Tlaib speak, they sent a 50,000 watt message to Palestinian voters. You don't have a voice in the Democratic Party. I'm not saying that's why Harris lost. It's one of the reasons Harris lost. Rashida Tlaib is a Democrat. The Democratic message to Palestinian Americans last year was vote for Democrats because there will be slightly less ethnic cleansing in Gaza than there will be if Trump is elected. That was the message. That was the message. New Quinnipiac poll reveals 60% of American voters now oppose more U.S. military aid to Israel. This is the worst polling on Israel I've ever seen. It's not just bad for Israel, it's also bad for Democrats because voters expect Trump to be all in on mass slaughter or famine. This is really bad for the Democrats. Half of registered voters in this Quinnipiac poll say Israel is guilty of genocide in Gaza. Only 35% say it isn't genocide. So, forgive me for bringing up politics when you talk about Gaza, but as I've said before, politics is the only solution to Gaza. And this is the Democratic Party's blind spot, Gaza. They segment voters into ethnic identities. They view Gaza as a battle for Jewish voters versus Arab American voters. They see it as a zero-sum game. So we have to pick a side. So Rashida Tlaib isn't going to speak. We'll wring our hands over Netanyahu, but in the end, we're going to pick the Jewish vote, what they think are Jewish voters, over Arab American voters. By not allowing Rashida Tlaib to speak at the convention, the idiots who run the Democratic Party, and they are idiots, they think they're smart. They thought they were threading the needle. They thought they had figured they lose fewer votes blocking Rashida Tlaib from speaking than they lose allowing her to speak. They think they're smart by doing those computations. Again, this goes back to what I said earlier about Democrats. They stake out positions that don't lose them votes instead of staking out positions that win them votes. This is about lack of leadership. This is about people with money controlling a party, people with money who have no core beliefs other than how do I make more money and win. You can't claim to be the party of peace in the Middle East. You can't claim to want a two-state solution when you refuse to even let Rashida Tlaib, a member of your own party, who speaks for millions of voters, when you won't allow her to speak at your convention. You're full of it. It's an example of the Democratic leadership's arrogance, where, don't worry, we've got this. We figure there's less to lose if we shut Rashida Tlaib up. What were you so afraid of that you couldn't let Rashida Tlaib speak? They haven't learned their lesson. Last Tuesday, the Democratic Committee met in Minneapolis once again, proving how tone deaf they are, catering to specific tribes instead of human decency. The Democratic Party once again rejected a resolution calling for an embargo on American weapons shipped to Israel. So what polls are the geniuses running the Democratic Party? What polls are they looking at that tells them it's a winning message to vote down a resolution for an arms embargo on Israel? This is another example of Democrats selling themselves to voters by saying, we're not as bad as Trump. Vote for Democrats. Now, just like Trump, we facilitate the ethnic cleansing of Gaza, but unlike Trump, we wring our hands over it. That is the message Democrats are sending. And because the leadership breaks voters down into demographics, they don't realize that this isn't a Jewish, Palestinian, Arab thing. It's a human thing. Anyone who pays attention is appalled by the situation in Gaza. This isn't about alienating Jewish or Arab voters. This is about alienating humanity, choosing between humanity and AIPAC. And it's identical to Medicare for all, in my estimation. Although what's going on in Gaza, not exactly the same thing, but there's an analog to Medicare for all. Democrats admit our for-profit healthcare system is a killing field, but there's really nothing we can do about it. Like Gaza, it's complicated. You know, you got the insurance company, boring parties, and we just we like the idea of Medicare, maybe Medicare, but it's we'd like to solve the problem. But where's the polling on this? That's what I hear Democrats say. Show me how Medicare for all is a winning message. Well, that's disingenuous for Democrats to say that. It's true, the polling isn't there for Medicare for all. But it's definitely there on who the villain in healthcare is. The polling shows Americans hate the for-profit health insurance companies. So build off that and start leading and teaching about Medicare for all, so Medicare for all polls better. This is the structural problem with the Democratic Party. The people in charge view politics as a team sport. It's just, let's win. Well, now that you've won, what are you going to do? Well, we're going to try to win again. Let's do a three-peat. Yeah, but who benefits from your win? Not the fans. The UN is now officially calling the situation in Gaza famine. The UN works with global monitors of malnutrition who check on availability of food and water. The UN now says famine is taking place inside Gaza. Again, I'm not talking morality here. I'm talking politics. I'm talking about winning elections. How do you not see these images from Gaza and think it doesn't resonate with all Americans? This isn't about Jewish voters versus Arab voters. This is about voters, human decency. Chuck Schumer, who wants to be majority leader again, last year gave a speech when he was the Senate majority leader saying Israel had to get rid of Netanyahu, otherwise Israel will become pariahs on the world stage. That was a year ago, more than a year ago. Netanyahu's still there, and the situation is far, far worse. So, does Chuck Schumer think he's going to win back control of the Senate, opposing an embargo on weapons to Israel? Even Marjorie Taylor Greene is calling it genocide, and she hates the Palestinians. When you have people like Tucker Carlson and Marjorie Taylor Greene, two people who hate Jews but hate Palestinians even more, when you have Tucker Carlson and Marjorie Taylor Greene calling for an end to the suffering in Gaza, but the Democrats can't bring themselves to support an arms embargo, how do you expect to win back the House for the Senate. What are you offering voters? Now, when I say Tucker Carlson and Marjorie Taylor Greene hate Jews, they're opposed to certain laws that facilitate that. There were certain laws that they opposed because it violated free speech, but it would have made life easier for Jews. And so hating Jews was a harsh. I'm not going to say they hate. Take that. I think they like them. I don't think they like anybody. I don't think they like themselves. Okay. So, what the Democrats are offering is a gentler ethnic cleansing of Gaza. Steve Witkoff, the real estate investor, turned peace envoy, met in the Oval Office with Donald Trump and Jared Kushner to plan post-war scenarios for Gaza. So one would think they are devising some sort of Marshall Plan to fly in food and medicine and rebuild Gaza and help the Palestinians on the road to self-government. No, that's not what the meeting was about. They pretty much met to discuss how to finish the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. Now, sometimes I exaggerate, okay? Like I said, Tucker Carlson and Marjorie Taylor Greene hate Jews. That was for comedic effect. They don't hate Jews. This meeting in the Oval Office this is not an exaggeration. This is about the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. Jared Kushner speaking at Harvard in March of last year. Jared Kushner, who was Trump's chief Middle East diplomat during the first Trump administration. Steve Witkoff has that position now. Jared Kushner, speaking of Gaza last year at Harvard, called Gaza, quote, very valuable real estate. He said it's oceanfront property. Jared Kushner said there's a great opportunity to build up in Gaza, build tall buildings in Gaza like they do in other oil-rich Middle Eastern nations. He said, if it were up to me, quote, I would do my best to move the people out and then clean it up. Jared Kushner went on to suggest, while speaking at Harvard, that Palestinians be moved to Egypt or the Negev Desert. So, that is the definition of ethnic cleansing. That's not an exaggeration. That is Jared Kushner calling for the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. Ethnic cleansing, according to the UN, genocide. Jared Kushner, whose own grandmother survived the Holocaust, Jared Kushner calling for genocide. Jared Kushner is a real estate investor, and anyone who is from New York City knows that gentrification, while it isn't ethnic cleansing, it's ethnic rinsing. Entire neighborhoods are wiped out to make room for massive development. And this is the problem with appointing real estate investors to solve the Middle East. There's only one thing they know: gentrification. Donald Trump, Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, these are New York City real estate investors. These guys drive through Black or Hispanic neighborhoods in New York, and instead of thinking, I'm a real estate developer, how can I add to these communities? How can I improve, build on, and yes, profit off what these people have already created? How can I preserve the neighborhood's character, celebrate it, protect the people who live here? Instead, these real estate developers think, how can I ethnically rinse this prime real estate to make room for white people? How can I destroy all these buildings, erase all the history, eliminate these Spanish-speaking people of color, these Black people, who've lived here for decades, how can I replace them with white people? How can I tear down this bodega and replace it with a Luliman? It's ethnic rinsing. And when you look at people like Steve Witkoff, Donald Trump, and Jared Kushner, real estate developers, the people who can do that to the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Harlem, that's how they see Gaza. That's all they know how to do when it comes to Gaza. All they know how to do is to force the poor, the disenfranchised, the old, the weak, the disabled out of their neighborhoods and then build luxury skyscrapers, primarily for foreign oligarchs so they can launder their money. And this is not exaggeration. That is their plan for Gaza. That is the plan, to move the Palestinians, to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians, and then finance Jewish settlers who want to reclaim the land, and they're going to finance them by building luxury resorts and tax-free manufacturing zones, all on the graves of dead Palestinians. That is the plan, and they're being quite open about it. Now, I'm not making a value judgment here. I am telling you what they're planning. Maybe you agree with them. Maybe you agree that Gaza should be ethnically cleansed. They report this in Israel. You don't hear this in the United States. But they have been open about ethnically cleansing Gaza. Former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, who could have stopped the illegal invasion of Iraq back in 2003, apparently he noticed the blood on his hands has lost its sheen. So he was inside that Oval Office meeting with Kushner and Steve Witkoff this week. That's who you have attending a meeting on post-war plans for Gaza. Tony Blair, who along with George W. Bush is responsible for at least 1 million dead Iraqis. Yeah, let's put Tony Blair in the room to figure out the post-war plan for Gaza. Noticeably absent from this meeting on what to do with Gaza after the war, noticeably absent, Palestinians. Last month, I reported on the Boston Consulting Group, along with two of Tony Blair's closest advisors, drawing up plans for this. This is why I tell you when I've messed around with pictures and art. This is not artificial intelligence. This is an actual plan. I think maybe they used artificial intelligence to devise this, but this is a real plan. It's an actual slide from a deck that aides to former British Prime Minister Tony Blair. They put together a deck for plans to create the new Gaza. The new Gaza, filled with high-end luxury resorts, skyscrapers, shopping malls, and tax-free manufacturing zones to entice international investors and, of course, Jewish settlers, because this is the land God promised them in the Bible. They say, read the Old Testament, to which I say, you read the Old Testament. God said, Gaza, in the book of Judges and book of Joshua, God promises Gaza to the tribe of Judah, one of the 12 tribes of Israel. Didn't promise it to Israel, promised it to the tribe of Judah. Gaza was promised, if you believe the crap in the Old Testament, Gaza was promised to the descendants of the tribe of Judah. So to these Israeli settlers, unless you can prove to me that you're a member of the tribe of Judah, it ain't yours. Netanyahu and Trump have made it clear. They always say about Hitler, if you want to know what Hitler planned, all you had to do was listen to his speeches or read Mein Kampf. It's all there. This is what Netanyahu has been saying for all of 2025. Netanyahu said this year there will be no two-state solution. He said that's over. He said, as long as I'm in charge, the Palestinians will never have a country. Trump said this year the two-state solution ship has sailed. Mike Huckabee, our ambassador to Israel, said Palestinians should be removed, ethnically cleansed from Gaza, and space for the Palestinians should be carved out of an Arab nation, said Mike Huckabee, our ambassador to Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu's government is already engaging in talks with African nations to take the Palestinians living in Gaza. There are, 2.5 million Palestinians in Gaza. Netanyahu has already announced plans to reoccupy all of Gaza to create what is called humanitarian city. This is, beyond Orwellian. This is the plan. Humanitarian city, it would be in southern Gaza. All Palestinians living in Gaza will be rounded up and placed in humanitarian city, unable to leave until they can be shipped off to a third country. Donald Trump, early this year, when Netanyahu made his first visit to the White House this year, Donald Trump, standing next to Netanyahu, said all of Gaza should be emptied out and replaced with luxury resorts, high-end apartments, and golf courses, an idea, no doubt, he got from Jared. Do you remember the memes on the internet of Trump Gaza, how funny we all thought it was? We all thought it was a joke. It's not. It's not. Kushner, Steve Witkoff, Donald Trump, they see no difference between the Palestinians in Gaza and the blacks or Hispanics or the old people or the poor people living in Brooklyn, the Bronx, or East Harlem. Get them out of here. Get rid of them. Like the homeless. I don't care where they go, but they can't stay here. We're seeing it with the homeless in Washington, D.C. You're listening to the mop-up, and I am going to wrap it up. How we doing? All right, please like this episode so I remain in your feed. Please share this. So, Donald Trump is a huge fan of Bibi Netanyahu's. Earlier this month, Donald Trump called Bibi Netanyahu a war hero because of the attack that they did on Iran. What was it, in July? And then Trump said, I guess I'm a war hero too. Really, Donald Trump, you really think you're a war hero? 4 phony student deferments and 1 really phony medical deferment to avoid fighting in Vietnam. But all Donald Trump had to do was pick up a phone and order our military to drop bombs on Iran. And suddenly you're a war hero. He's a war hero. Here he is talking to Mark Levin of Fox News.
Worked with your friend Bibi. He's a good man. He's in there fighting. He's fighting. They're trying to put him in jail on top of everything else. How about that? He's a war hero because we work together. He's a war hero. I guess I am too. Nobody cares, but I am too. I mean, I sent those planes.
He sent those planes. I sent those planes. I had to pick up a phone to send those planes. Those receivers are heavy. Yes. Trump is a war hero. That's why we've gone ahead and convinced Congress to authorize a series of monuments honoring Trump's service for this country. Here is a marble statue of Donald Trump eating a Big Mac, sitting on the toilet, phoning in that famous airstrike over Iran. That's the Trump War Memorial. And he deserves a medal because he risked his life sitting in that toilet on the phone. The water could have backed up and touched his phone, and he could have been electrocuted. For those of you who have seen the Vietnam Memorial, one of the most powerful works of art ever created, was designed by Maya Lin, but it was erected in 1981. Time to get rid of the Vietnam Memorial, and we've replaced it by something even more inspiring. This is the monument to Donald Trump, a war monument to Donald Trump sitting on the toilet, talking on the phone, watching the first 10 minutes of Ken Burns's 12-part documentary on the Vietnam War before Donald got bored. Trump called it 10 of the most harrowing moments of his life. And he deserves a monument for watching 10 minutes of that series. Here's Trump in Statuary Hall. We just put this up. It's a war monument honoring Trump for phoning in his airstrike over Yemen back in March. This man sacrificed for our country. Look how he watches helplessly as his Big Mac gets cold. But he had to phone in that bomb strike. That's the sacrifice he made for his country. Outside the Capitol Rotunda is the new monument honoring Donald Trump's victory over Steve Colbert. And on the eastern side of the Rotunda is a monument honoring Trump's victory over ABC and George Sloppodopoulos. That's what he calls him, Little George Sloppodopoulos. This is a monument to Trump's victory over Little George Sloppodopoulos that is now inside the Florida State House. At Arlington Cemetery, the grave of President Kennedy was dug up, the eternal flame blown out, and replaced with a war monument honoring Trump's victory over children's programming on the PBS. This is the Washington Mall. This went up yesterday. This is a new war monument honoring Trump's victory over the cream spinach at Peter Luger Steakhouse. A lot of people thought the acid reflux from the creamed spinach at Peter Luger Steakhouse would make it impossible for Donald Trump to barge into the dressing room of Miss Teen USA. A lot of people think, you know what? He couldn't handle creamed spinach, the acid reflux. He won't be able to barge into the dressing room, Miss Teen USA. But Donald Trump summoned the spirit of his hero, U.S. Army Lieutenant William Calley, who, as you know, single-handedly won the Battle of My Lai, and Trump soldiered on and showed up at the Miss Teen USA pageant and got to watch the girls dress and undress. Oh, this is interesting. This is out by the Jefferson Memorial. They added a war monument honoring another huge Trump victory, Rosie O'Donnell moving to Ireland. Why would there be a whale? I don't know why they included a whale in that. Makes no sense to me. Visitors to the Hart Senate office building can now enjoy another Trump war monument honoring our commander-in-chief, Donald Trump, for his victory in outliving John McCain. That is, there it is. That's the new Trump Outlives McCain War Memorial that we've put up. We put up. On your way to the Lincoln Memorial, stop off and pay your respect to this new war monument honoring Trump's victory of Joe Biden by Hunter Biden, not Don Jr., ending up with a crack addiction. Very proud of the fact that Donald Trump is very proud that it was Hunter and not Don Jr. who ended up as the crack addict. And then swing over to the Smithsonian's new museum. What's it called? Is this a new museum? The Smithsonian Museum of Joe Biden's Stutter. There's a new museum that Donald Trump, out of the kindness of his heart, opened up now that he controls the Smithsonian. You might want to catch a show at the Dr. Jill Biden is Not a Medical Doctor Center for the Performing Arts. It's a brand new performing art. The Dr. Jill Biden is Not a Medical Doctor Center for the Performing Arts. And then spend some time pondering this new monument of Donald Trump sitting on the toilet, holding a can of Diet Coke. As the great emancipator, he's sitting on the toilet as the great emancipator, shouting, "Let my pee hole go. Let my pee hole go." I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. Donald Trump, I want to make sure everybody saw this, because it's very important. That is Donald Trump as the great emancipator, sitting on the toilet, shouting into his cell phone as the great emancipator, "Let my pee hole go." Yeah, I'm David Feldman, reminding you, maybe, yeah, okay. Please like this episode, or at least parts of it. Hit the notification bell. Subscribe to my channel. Share this, please, with your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, your great-grandparents, your grandparents, grandparents, your uncle. Thank you to Bob and Mila in the chat room for keeping the conversation civil. I will be doing a show over the Labor Day weekend because you're all I've got. Thank you.